Narayana Sprityana Chaiva Gautamide Saraswati Sinsini Satorjaya Virayet. Namaste and Sri Ramajayam to everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mahabharata Adiparva on my channel Kaliyuga Dharma. Now, before we go into today's episode, I must remind all my viewers that the content that I put on the screen as part of the video, the writings that you see in every part of my video, is not meant to be read by you as you keep listening to my narration. You can listen to my narration, and later, when you want to revisit an old video, you can pause wherever you wish to, and you can see the content that I've put up in order to get a better understanding and better takeaways in every single video. So it's not necessary that as you're listening to what I'm saying, you also have to simultaneously read what it is on the screen. You can just listen to what I'm saying and just keep going with it. That being said, we continue from episode 3, and today we will look at another student of Dhaumya, Vaidamuni, our senior student, and we will look more importantly at Vaidamuni's own student, Uttanka. This episode's primary focus is to explore how a knowledgeable man who knows the word of God, the Vedas, and who knows so many truths about God's creations can himself fall to anger and as a result to ignorance driven by hatred. Vaidamuni was already a senior man who had his own students, and he taught them just the way Dhaumya taught his disciples. Vaida was a man of impeccable character, and so was a student, Uttanka, which made Uttanka all the more trusted by Vaidamuni. When Dhaumya was out of the ashrama attending to some yajna or some other royal duties for some king in a kingdom, he would give Vaidamuni the right to caretake his ashrama. And if Vaidamuni too was out of the ashrama, then he would hand over the caretaking duties to Uttanka, his own student. Character was everything in the Vedic world, and it still is today among those who call themselves Vaidikas and are following the Vedas. Without character, you could not rise in the real world materially or even in the spiritual womb spiritually. And this is a reality even today. It's not just restricted to the Mahabharata. It's a reality of the world even today in Sanatana Dharma in general. When Uttanka was caretaking the ashrama in Vaidamuni's absence, a group of women calling themselves the servants of Vaidamuni's wife came to his hut and told him that his guru, Vaidamuni's wife, wished to have sexual intercourse with him. Now, we do not know who these women were. They could have even been tricksters from nearby lands trying to play some mischief in the ashrama, as performing such dirty tricks on good people was very common even back then as they are today. The shocked Uttanka told these women to get out of his sight at once, and he stopped short of cursing them for even thinking such a perverse and an evil thought, for he knew well that Vaidamuni's wife, according to the Manushastra, was like his own mother to him, was not even remotely capable of such depravity. The women got up and left, and they were never to be seen again or heard of again. Now, Uttanka was told by Vaidamuni that the wife... Now Vaidamuni eventually returned to the ashrama, and upon returning to the ashrama, when he heard what had happened, he was very impressed by Uttanka, and he understood that Uttanka was a man of good judgment and that he could judge who was good, who was bad, and that his wife would have never ever made such an evil request, and that he applauded that Uttanka stood by morality and drove these immoral people away. Now, Uttanka was told after a few days by Vaidamuni that the wife of the king Paushya of Takshashila, who was a relative and a vassal of Janamejaya, had promised him her earrings as Guru Dakshina. And so he asked Uttanka to go to Takshashila and fetch the earrings for him. On the way, Uttanka came upon a fairly isolated path, and he felt extremely hungry. A lone cowherd with his healthy and fat cow was coming that way, and he asked Uttanka what was wrong. Uttanka told him that he was hungry, and the cowherd in turn told Uttanka that Vaidamuni himself had taught him long ago that the dung of the cow was not just an acceptable form of food, but that it was a holy thing to consume, reminding him that even the Vedas say this about cow dung. Now, regarding doubts about cow dung, how is it that Hindus can consume cow dung, etc.? We will be seeing in various parts of Mahabharata about how the cow is actually a celestial being, and that anything that comes out of the cow is not the same as anything that comes out of other animals. And therefore, cows, depending on the kind of breed they come from and the way in which they are bred, they bear that much tapasya and holiness in them. This is a complex topic, and we will be going through this in the future episodes of the Mahabharata. But for now, we are only going to focus on what the cowherd told Uttanka. The cowherd told Uttanka, the dung of the cow is not just an accepted resource as food, but it was a holy offering of the yajnas itself, and that he can eat it. Uttanka at once remembered what his guru had taught him, and he thought to himself, yes, he is right. And he ate the dung of the cow, and he felt his hunger go away. He thanked the cowherd and went on his journey. Upon reaching the palace of Takshashila, he was greeted by King Pausya himself, who told him that he could go to the queen's quarter of the palace and take the earrings from her as promised. The queen sent a messenger to Uttanka saying that even without having to come outside her quarters, she could tell from far away that after eating he had not performed the Achimana rite. Now, I have to pause over here and tell you a little bit about what this even means. The Vijas, that is those who wear the Yajnopavita, have a certain rite they must perform before and after eating. The rite being Achamana, they have to take 3 drops of water in their hand, invoke 3 names of Paramatman, Achyuta, Ananta and Govinda, and they have to recite 12 more names of Paramatman in a certain order, and they have to perform this before and after eating. This is for basically maintaining a certain level of spiritual purity in yourself after a physical and a fairly materialistic act. There are lots of reasons why this is done. It's done even today. While there are many reasons to explain why this is done, the immediate reason that one needs to know, the most basic reason, is for spiritual purity. Uttanka immediately asked for a bowl of water, and he performed the Achmana, and the queen immediately came out of her private chambers and handed over the earrings. The queen was such a spiritually great woman that even from far away, she could tell that the man sitting outside her chambers was a man who had not performed Achimana. This was the kind of people who lived even back then, even in the beginning of Kali Yuga. There were people spiritually elevated like this. A queen, no less. As he was leaving the palace with the earrings, King Pausya told him that he had performed Pitra Tarpana that day and he wanted to offer him the prasada of Pitra Tarpana. When he bought the food and gave it to Uttanka, Uttanka saw the king's hair in it. Angered, he told the king that this was an insult to him and he cursed the king to go blind. Some of us might now ask ourselves, isn't this a little too much? Okay, there's a hair strand by mistake in it. Why curse him to go blind for this? Well, Uttanka is not a perfect character, as we shall see in some time to come. And he was prone to anger. And the entire point of the Mahabharata is this. Just because you are the student of a sage and you have some knowledge of the Vedas doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. So Uttanka uttered a curse like this. Now the king, on his part, he got very angry and he said, "How dare you curse me and lie to me that I put hair deliberately in your food? Here, let me curse you back. May you go childless." And the king cursed Uttanka, saying that Uttanka should go childless. Uttanka replied that the king's words will bear no effect, as the king's hair was indeed in the food, and that it was no lie, and that the king's curse was based on the assumption that Uttanka was lying. His words will not bear any effect. The king took the bowl of food and rechecked it and understood his mistake. He did see hair strands in it, and he apologized to Uttanka for his mistake and asked Uttanka to please revoke his curse, because as a blind man he will not be able to remain a king and he'll have to abdicate the crown. Uttanka, whose anger had gone away by now, told the king, "Okay, I cannot take my curse back, but I can give you a boon instead." And he told the king that although you will go blind in some time to come, I am giving you the boon that a few days after you go blind, your eyesight will once again come back. So saying, Uttanka left the palace and he was back on his way through forest, hill and plains back to his distant ashrama. On the way back, he wanted to take bath and he took his clothes off and entered the river with just one cloth on himself, as commanded by the Shastras. While bathing, he observed a beggar walking on the banks of the river, and he thought, okay, just a harmless beggar, so what? But the beggar ran up to where he had left his clothes, picked up the clothes and the earrings, and ran away. Uttanka came out of the river in a haste and chased the beggar, and when he was about to catch the beggar turned into a mysterious, mystical-looking snake, and he disappeared. Uttanka knew that this was some supernatural being, a Naga, who possessed powers to travel to other lokas, and therefore he sat over there and recited a mantra from the Vedas, which at once made him appear in the same loka where the Naga sorcerer had carried the earrings and run away. Uttanka now gained a certain realization upon appearing in Nagaloka that this Naga was not an ordinary Naga, it was Takshaka, a primordial Naga with ancient powers of sorcery and penance, and he was known to roam around in those lands. He therefore knew that even to find him, normal human methods will not work and he would have to resort to Vedic magic. He explored Nagaloka for a while, and he saw that it was covered by all kinds of beautiful hills, forests, dales, adorned with Naga palaces. Then he sat there and he began to make an invocation in the form of a Vedic mantra in the hope that the mantra's power would be able to drag Takshaka out of his hiding place and bring him out. Instead of Takshaka, when he was reciting the mantra, a strange image appeared before Uttanka. The image of a group of 12 women weaving thread using a knitting wheel comprised of 12 spokes. Around the 12 women were 6 boys running around in circles, and around this entire image was a flaming horse with a flaming rider galloping all around them. Uttanka understood that while his mantra was bearing some effect so far, Takshaka was no small enemy and that he probably had a spell protecting him. But merely looking at this image, it reminded Uttanka of the Vedas. He sang another mantra in which he named the 12 women as symbolic of Paramatman's creation divided into 12 cycles. The spokes of the wheel as 12 months of the year, the threads being woven as symbolic of the lokas and celestial objects being constantly destroyed and created, and the 6 boys as the 6 seasons from various lokas. He also in his mantra sang that the flaming horse and the rider was Paramatman himself, called over here by the name of Indra. As he finished his mantra with this thought in his mind, that image disappeared and the flaming horse and the flaming rider both exploded into flames, and as if out of nowhere, Takshaka came flying and was thrown at the feet of Uttanka, and he looked as if he had been beaten up and he was panting. Uttanka's deed, which looks very cryptic, shows us that using any scenario to remember Paramatman and the words of the Vedas will please Paramatman himself and make him aid you in some form or another. That was basically what happened. Like how Paramatman Shriman Narayana was pleased with Upamanyu's recitation in the last episode. And it made Paramatman send the Ashwin Devas to help him. Over here, the invocation pleased Shriman Narayana and made it bear fruit in the form of throwing Takshaka at Uttanka's feet. Takshaka was not terrified of Uttanka's invocation abilities, and he handed over the earrings, and Uttanka went back to Bhuloka and back to his ashram. Upon narrating these strange events to Vaidamuni, his guru used the power of his penance to look into the episodes Uttanka had experienced and told him that the cowherd had been Yama and his cow the personification of Lakshmi herself. The dung he had eaten was Amrita of the Devas. The flaming rider on the horse was Indra, and the flaming horse was Agnideva himself. And then he explained to Uttanka that invoking Shriman Narayana as the Antaryami of the Devas made Indra and Agni empower the mantra and bring out Takshaka defeated. Thus, Uttanka's devotion to the Vedas was what empowered his mantra. Vaidamuni was impressed that his student was indeed a blessed soul and a wise soul for this achievement of his. Yet then again, for all his so-called wisdom over the next few days, Uttanka pondered over how a Naga of all creatures had given him so much trouble, and he whipped himself up into an anger and a frenzy and into a hatred against not just Takshaka, but all Nagas. He told himself, he convinced himself that Takshaka and every other Naga out there is to be taught a lesson, and that the only way to do this was by annihilating their entire race entirely just for the misdeeds of one Naga. He therefore journeyed to King Janamejaya in Hastinapura and told him the truth of his father's death, which we will cover in our next episode in detail. He told him how his father had been murdered years ago by the same Takshaka, which was a fact. And an angered Janamejaya was then convinced by Uttanka that revenge was the best medicine to anger and that to truly honor his deceased father, Emperor Parikshit, Janamejaya should organize a yajna wherein Vedic mantras be used to drag Nagas, snakes from all the lokas including our own earth and burn them in a giant fire. Thus, Janamejaya was convinced that he would have to annihilate the entire race of Nagas just because one of their kind had insulted his family by killing his own father, Emperor Parikshit. Just the way Uttanka was convinced that the entire race had to perish just because the same Takshaka had wronged him in some way. We see how revenge, anger, and a frenzy to get even with someone can cloud our judgment, and that even the greatest Vedic wisdom will elude us thanks to our anger. Merely knowing the Vedas does not make one a wise man, for wisdom reflects in leaving things to God. Now, this does not mean that we sit and watch evil happening, saying that, okay, I'm leaving it to God. No. It means that once we finish doing our bit to stop an evil thing happening before us, we leave the rest to God and pray that such things do not repeat in the future. Uttanka should have done this after he retrieved the earrings. Until that point of time, he was a wise man and he should have left it at that. But he whipped himself up into an anger and convinced himself that he should get even with not just Takshaka, but punish his entire race for one Naga's misdeeds. No race can ever be made up of fully evil creatures, for Bhagavan himself ensures that good people and good creatures are born everywhere at any point of time, and that there is no justification for murdering a whole race of creatures for the crimes of one member of that race. So let us not fall into anger like Uttanka. Let us not fall into anger like Uttanka did after retrieving the earrings, but let us be wise the same way the same Uttanka was during his invocations in Nagaloka. The example of Uttanka tells us that we all are made of ignorance and wisdom alike, scattered across our annoyingly inconsistent, ever-fleeting and highly complicated minds, and it is up to us to embrace the wise person in ourselves from time to time. In our future episodes, we will explore tales from the lives of the descendants of Brahmarishi Bhrigu, and we will return to the point where Janamejaya and Uttanka organized their Sarpa Satra Yajna to perpetrate mass murder against the Naga race. We end our episode here with a usual shout out to Dakshin Vrndavan. I'd like to remind everyone that this organization is not a dairy farm. They don't sell milk or any milk products. They are a purely religious, dharmic organization whose sole purpose is to give cows and bulls, which are the akaras of Shri and Narayana themselves, a good life and ensure that dharma continues in Kali Yuga. This place is comprised entirely of cows and bulls that are rescued from slaughterhouses and from very evil fates that would have otherwise befallen them had they not been rescued. If you can afford spending 45,000 rupees, Indian rupees a year, do adopt a cow or a bull. Gauseva transforms your mind into a dharmic space and enables you to master dharmic scriptures such as Mahabharata, and to make yourself a more dharmic person and give you the strength of mind and courage to not just ponder about whatever you hear from this channel or anywhere else about the scriptures, but to also apply them in your daily life and make yourself a more dharmic person, a person who pleases Shriman Narayana, so that one day you will leave the cycle of birth and death and you yourself, with the blessings of all these cows, reach Paravaikuntha and spend eternity with all the Muktatmans, the Nityasuris, and our eternal parents, Shri and Narayana. Srimate Narayanaya Namo Namaha.